boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages. It's Jesse with the Common Nerd, bringing you pop culture and all things ready through a common sense lens. And you know, one of the nice part about earnings calls is you gotta get a look inside what's going on inside of a company out there. And Disney obviously had theirs yesterday, and it's one of them situations where obviously this involves Marvel and Star Wars and Pixar and all of the rest of the different properties and IPs that they own out there. Disney's like, Bob Iger's whole tenure has been literally nothing more than buying properties and kind of driving them down into the ground because he decided to let a bunch of other people who should not have ever been in charge or anywhere near these IPs control them and lead the direction for the future of them. Well, boys and girls, the best part sometimes when people say things, when they announce stuff, when they talk about things, when they try to promote them, is what they're not saying, because sometimes the devil truly is in the details, boys and girls. And with just a little bit of math, with just a little bit of logic, you can find out what Bob Iger was saying about the state of the rest of the properties over there under the Disney House of Mouse Bob Iger Corporation. Because I think most people out there can understand that Disney, Star Wars, and Disney Marvel have been in a very bad state for a very long time financially. The television shows don't do very well in the rating series out there. I mean, the box offices are just doing absolutely horrible for Marvel. And obviously, when was the last time we saw a Star Wars movie in the theaters where we were literally guaranteed one every other year from the House of Mouse when they initially bought Lucasfilm? Obviously, none of that has come to fruition. And obviously, it's one of them situations where Bob Iger and the rest of the corporation out there has told the public that they're going to drastically cut down on the amount of products they produce because they're simply not selling very well anymore, and the return on investment simply isn't there. They have spent tens of billions of dollars on literally destroying properties, whether it be Star Wars or Marvel. And well, boys and girls, now that the earnings call has happened, while Disney's Bob Iger was out there trying to promote how well Lilo and Stitch, specifically Stitch, was doing and the merchandising sales out there and how much he was accounting for the all-over merchandise sales for the entire company, Walt Disney, boys and girls, it tells you just abysmally how bad the state of Star Wars and Marvel is, at least from a financial and, of course, franchise and retail perspective, because boys and girls, like anybody that's been to an Ollie's lately knows, Star Wars and Marvel merch does not sell anymore. Because as you can see here from the headline over at thatparkplace.com, Bob Iger accidentally reveals Star Wars and Marvel retail slump while stumping for Lilo and Stitch. And I probably can imagine, like many of you out there, especially if you grew up in the 90s and they had the privilege of experiencing a Toys R Us, ladies and gentlemen, you knew every single year, part of the major Christmas little flyer that they'd send out, and it was the same thing with Walmart and Kmart. You guys remember those? All of those kind of major retailers out there. One of the big advertisements for them was always the latest and newest Star Wars toy. This was a franchise that was a money printing machine with only 3 movies on the books, 1 bad Christmas special, and an incredible vast array of books and comic books. George Lucas continued to keep this behemoth of a brand as a merchandise money printing machine for decades without even producing any new movies. Disney Star Wars cannot do this while producing constant new shows and television, boys and girls. This is how bad things really are. And when you see how much damage and how much of a drastic shift and loss you have seen in Star Wars and Marvel merchandising over the past few years because of the choices and decisions Bob Iger, Kathleen Kennedy, and Kevin Feige have made, it may indeed shock you, ladies and gentlemen, because what was once powerhouse brands like Star Wars that could sell out toys every year at Christmas has now turned into nothing more than a joke at the Ollie's bin. So we're going to hear this article from thatparkplace.com, getting all of the juicy details. But before we do, if you do enjoy our content, hit that like button, share with all your friends, and subscribe or follow if you have not already, boys and girls, because we are grinding, we are growing. We just crossed 2,100. We're sailing our way towards 22. I think we're sitting at like 21, 24, and I could not do that without every single one of you. Also, leave us a comment in the section down below. What do you think about this? Does it surprise you at all that these numbers actually pan out the way they do when it comes to Marvel and Star Wars merchandise? Does it surprise you at all that Bob Iger is out there pushing Stitch, which is one of the few brands that they still have that sells absolute gangbusters with merchandise? Do you think he actually intended to let this kind of sling slip, or do you think we're just seeing something more than what is actually here in the comment section down below? Tell us, what about if you're one of those Disney simps out there, if you're one of those people out there that's an absolute pixie duster and is still buying the merch? Let us know what your favorite new Disney Star Wars toy has been since you've started collecting and they've taken over the brand. Let us know what you think about all that in the comment section down below. As always, all opinions are welcome here. And if you'd like to support the channel, please check the links in the description as well. All right, from thatparkplace.com and our dear sweet WDW Pro, the absolute legend, boys and girls, when it comes to Disney scoops and information. Disney CEO Bob Iger recently made headlines during the company's Q3 2025 earnings call when he announced that Lilo & Stitch has become the second most lucrative merchandise brand under the Disney umbrella, trailing only Mickey and Friends. Boys and girls, it is the second most lucrative IP and brand when it comes to merchandise that Disney owns. That includes Marvel and Star Wars. Stitch sells more than Luke Skywalker. Stitch sells more than Captain America. Mind you, they haven't actually produced any new Captain America toys for quite a long time. All we've gotten is our Falcon in a Captain America suit, and of course, all of the rest of the garbage, other alternative versions that we've got. Like all of the Wakanda toys that we have seen at the Ollie's Bin over and over and over again. Lilo and Stitch, a movie that got one big movie, right? I think there was a couple of like straight to DVD sequels or something like that, and a television show, right? Now the live action, after all the excitement came out, Stitch is now number 2 at Disney, boys and girls, at Disney. Wow, how the mighty have fallen. While this may seem like a charming underdog success story, especially considering Lilo & Stitch was never a box office juggernaut, it actually signals deeper issues for some of Disney's biggest intellectual properties. The fact that Stitch merchandise is now outselling products from massive franchises like Marvel, Star Wars, and Disney princesses should be a major red flag for investors and fans alike. Yeah, boys and girls, been to your local Ollie's lately? Historically, Marvel and Star Wars have been merchandising powerhouses, each generating billions in annual retail sales. The Disney Princess line, too, has long been one of the company's most reliable revenue streams. And it's one of those things, too. Go to your local Walmart. Go to whatever your local big box retail chain store is. It's got a toy aisle, right? Because I remember the toy aisles from when I was a kid. I mean, the Star Wars sections were huge. The Disney Princess line sections, huge. Beyond what you can see on my screen, huge. 5-10 feet long of that aisle space. Just nothing. Disney Princess stuff. Nothing but Star Wars stuff, all of that kind of stuff, right? Long before Disney and Star Wars were ever connected, right? Major sections. Go to your local Walmart now. What do you see at Star Wars? 3, maybe 4 feet? How much of the Disney princesses out there? How many Ariels do you see? How many Sleeping Beauties do you see out there? How many of them do you see? How big is that section now? I know at mine, it's probably 3 feet at the most. At the most. Even the Disney Princess line isn't selling. Wow, I wonder why after the Snow White abomination and the race-swapped Little Mermaid you produced. How'd those live actions work out for you in the box office, Bob Iger? If Stitch, a character from modestly performing 2002 film that grossed just $273 million globally, okay, remember, Marvel and Star Wars movies made $1 billion or more all of the time back in the day. Except for Solo. Solo lost money. That's insane. $273 million. And now it is the number 2 franchise merchandise selling character in all of the properties that Disney owns. That is insane. Has leapfrogged all 3 of these pillars in retail performance, it implies that these franchises have experienced a significant decline in consumer demand. It's not necessarily that Stitch is now an unbeatable brand, rather it's that others are failing to maintain their past dominance. In fact, reports indicate that Stitch-related merchandise generated an astonishing $2.6 billion in retail sales in 2024, an exponential rise from the $200 million that it brought in just 5 years ago. That is insane. In what world do you see any kind of return on investment in 5 years go from 200 million to 2.6 billion just in retail sales? That is insane. 9 months ago, when Disney scheduled Lilo and Stitch for release in theaters, this is from the New York Times, on Memorial Day week, Mr. Bergman was cautiously optimistic about his chances. Even with no new content, Disney's consumer products group had managed to expand sales of Stitch merchandise to $2.6 billion in 2024 from $200 million in 2019. Young adults clearly had nostalgia for the property, and that's 100% accurate. My wife loves Stitch to no end. My 6 children and counting love Stitch to no end. Boys and girls, this is an undeniable fact. He became a cult hit, even if he wasn't a global phenomenon at the time. If we look at that $2.6 billion in 2024 and then add Disney's own declaration of how much Lilo and Stitch had grown in retail sales year to year, things actually get pretty darn concerning. This is from Bob Iger in his prepared statement. Meanwhile, Lilo and Stitch is on track to become the company's second largest licensed merchandise franchise this year, behind only Mickey Mouse. Has anybody else listened to enough of these calls that I could hear Bob Iger's voice in my head because of the cadence and the way he gives these prepared speeches every single time? With more than 70% revenue growth compared to the last year, Stitch has also been deployed across our parks and experiences worldwide as we leverage the popularity of this global phenomenon. Let's put that in perspective as well. They're not deploying Star Wars or Marvel characters all across their parks and experiences because that draws things anymore. No, a movie from the 2000s that didn't even crack $300 million globally is now the most popular and successful brand they have, and they're dumping all their money behind promoting it. Not Luke Skywalker, not Captain America, not Black Panther, no, not Iron Man, not even Tony Stark. No, boys and girls. Not Darth Vader. No. Stitch, an alien from a movie that didn't crack $300 million globally, boys and girls, compared to billion-dollar franchises that Disney owns, like Marvel and Star Wars. That is not a good sign. If Stitch stuff is now selling 70% higher than 2024, that puts its gross retail of $4.42 billion. That's insane. And don't get me wrong, that's great for Stitch, but it would not be great for Star Wars, Disney princesses, and Marvel. Yet, according to Bob Iger, Lilo and Stitch is beating all of them. Every single one. Boys and girls. I remember back in the day, you could slap any of the big Marvel's Avengers characters on merchandise and it would sell like hotcakes. Star Wars used to be one of the most, if not arguably the most popular brand for toys in the retail market in the 90s. Like I said, Walmart, Toys R Us, Kmart, all big. Their Christmas specials, their Christmas advertisements to come on, there was always a predominant, at least 2-page section of nothing but the latest Star Wars toys. Now Stitch is beating Darth Vader, boys and girls. Stitch. This sharp growth contrasts with a broader narrative of stagnation or decline across Disney's other core brands. Which, hey, by the way, who bought those brands? Bob Iger. Who saw those brands decline under his stewardship? Bob Iger. Who hired Kathleen Kennedy and Kevin Feige to run the show with Star Wars and Marvel? That's right, Bob Iger. You want somebody to blame? Blame him. It's not the fans and the customers' fault. It's Bobby Boy's fault. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has suffered from franchise fatigue and a stirring of underwhelming releases. Star Wars has been limited theatrical output and mixed receptions to its Disney Plus offerings. Mixed receptions is pro being very nice. The majority of fans hate the majority of stuff Disney Star Wars has produced. And pretty much Disney Marvel since post-Endgame as well. The Disney Princess brand, while still beloved, hasn't launched a breakout new character in years, and existing characters may be facing cultural overexposure or shifting taste among younger audiences. Yeah, because as the generations continue and as they damage these brands more and more, there will less be generational passing of the torch to the new kids coming out there. Because if everything Disney is currently producing right now is garbage, why are you going to want to introduce your kids to a Disney princess and get them excited about it? I know my daughters are way more excited about Barbies than Disney princesses. And that is a sad state of affairs because I was a Disney kid, boys and girls. Iger says Stitch has leapfrogged Star Wars. Yet even before rampant inflation, Star Wars was bringing in $3 billion per year in 2020. Today, one would expect inflation alone would have lifted that to more than $5 billion. So if a single character is outperforming the entire Star Wars portfolio now, it seems obvious that Star Wars and Marvel have cratered in retail sales. Anybody that's been in Ollie's lately knows that's truth. And seriously, the Galactic Star Cruiser, anybody? Talk about $1 billion flushed down the toilet in less than a couple of years. Because guess what? It just had to be set during the Kathleen Kennedy era of Star Wars. No. You couldn't possibly show George Lucas's characters off. Had to be all about KK. How'd that work out over there? What's especially troubling is what this signals for Disney's broader strategy. If the company is now prioritizing characters like Stitch, once considered a niche figure, because he's outperforming legacy franchises, that likely means executives are reallocating resources, marketing efforts, and product lines towards what's currently working. And Bob Iger said this. Bob Iger flat out said this when they talked about the fact that they are going to drastically reduce the movies and television shows that they produce for Marvel and Star Wars, going from multiple projects a year to now one movie a year and one television a year for both brands. If these things were selling like hotcakes and were still being a big prominent moneymaker for the House of Mouse, that would not be happening. Boy, I wonder why they fast-tracked the Lilo and Stitch live-action movie. And what do you want to bet? We're going to see some more box office releases of sequels to that movie in the future very shortly, boys and girls. We are getting Toy Story 5 after all. That shift may come at the expense of developing or revitalizing other tentpole properties. It will, and guess what? Bob Iger don't care anymore. He needs to make money because at the end of the day, despite all the virtue signaling, everybody over at the House of Mouse, at least in the executive suite seat under Bob Iger, absolutely worship at the altar of money. Boys and girls, that's their almighty God. That's their totem, is money, not your activism, which is why everything's changing over there. The merchandising gross isn't just symbolic. It drives revenue, fuels theme park integration, and supports multi-platform storytelling. When a character like Stitch ascends to the top of the mountain, it suggests the usual titans have stumbled. In short, Bob Iger's announcement isn't just an amusing data point. It's a clear signal that Disney's once dominant franchises, Marvel, Star Wars, and Disney princesses, are losing ground where it matters most: consumer interest and spending. Stitch's rise doesn't just reflect his growing popularity, it reveals that the company's flagship IPs are no longer the merchandise engines they once were. That's obvious. You know what I mean? It's just so nice to have the financial data to back it up, right? Because all of our stuff is technically, it's allegorical. You know what I mean? It's that first-person knowledge. There's a word for it that I'm having a brain fart right now, and I can't remember, right? But it's essentially, it's hearsay. It's circumstantial evidence, right? It's all, we've been to Ollie's. We see the giant. Literally, the row at Ollie's of Marvel merch is at least twice the size, if not 3 times the size of Marvel merch at Walmart, right? And it's the same thing with Star Wars. So our anecdotal evidence, that's the word I was looking for. Our anecdotal evidence is exactly what it is. Going to Ollie's, taking pictures, showing you these massive bins, going to Walmart, showing you these sections, showing you how small they are now, how little is selling. And that the only sold out toys are ever stuff from the original trilogy, right? Or some stuff from the prequels, right? But guess what? The Eternals figures aren't selling. Shuri from the new Black Panther Wakanda Forever, the new female Black Panther, those characters aren't selling. Ahsoka kind of does okay sometimes. Any of those characters from the Acolyte, how'd that lightsaber thing work out? That lightsaber crowd fund you tried getting for the Obi-Wan Kenobi series that wasn't about Obi-Wan at all. That was all about the black female character that apparently, Lightsabers to the gut don't do anything anymore. Rest in peace, Qui-Gon Jinn. But this is the state that they've gotten to. Their storytelling, their garbage products that they have produced, their damage to the brands of Marvel and Disney and Star Wars that they have done, Marvel and Disney Star Wars that they have done, have driven their retail sales into the toilet. What was once the powerhouse that was the Star Wars merchandise brand that George Lucas built from the ground up and turned into one of the most successful, large-scale global phenomenons that we have ever seen and likely will never see again in our lifetimes. That thing sold like hotcakes every single year. And now Disney has turned those powerhouses brands of Star Wars and Marvel into something nothing more replaced by a character from, don't get me wrong, an arguably very cult popular movie, but didn't even crack $300 million at the box office. While their characters that brought in billions of dollars made $1 billion or more at the box office, now are regulated to the Ollie's bargain bin. Why? Because Bob Iger hired and allowed Kevin Feige and Kathleen Kennedy to have full carte blanche as to what they did with those brands. Kathleen Kennedy flat out said they were going to turn Star Wars into a girls brand. How's that worked out for them? Kevin Feige allowed the exact same thing to happen over there at Marvel. How'd that work out for them? Right? Ratings are in the toilet. They've spent billions of dollars on productions nobody watches. Fantastic Four is flopping at the box office. Captain America Brave New World flopped at the box office. Thunderbolts flopped. The Marvels flopped. That's the state of Bob Iger's Disney corporation that owns Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar, and everything else he could gobble up in his tenure. Bob Iger has done nothing but destroy and devastate these brands that he has spent billions of dollars acquiring. And I don't get how the Disney shareholders can't see this, because they just keep on sucking him off and keeping him in that position. And he just keeps blowing more smoke up their butt, and they just keep on buying into it. I don't get it, and I never will understand it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the investors' opinions, the Disney shareholders' opinions are. Because at the end of the day, the audience and the customers and the fans decide. And the fans have decided that Stitch is now more popular from a retail and a merchandising perspective than Star Wars. Boys and girls, if that's not a sad state of affairs and an absolute damning report on Bob Iger's tenure at Disney, I don't know what is, boys and girls. Because clearly from a retail perspective, Star Wars and Marvel are dead. And Bob Iger has no one to blame for himself. You danced with the devil, and now you've gotten burned. And after all, it's exactly what you deserve.